Hello, you're watching Talking Europe. Getting the European Green Deal finished is one of the EU Commission's top priorities in the last months of this legislative term. At stake is a major transformation of Europe's economies and societies, which could see the continent become climate neutral by 2050. We hear a lot about energy strategy, but we don't often talk about another core element of the Green Deal, which is oceans and fisheries. My guest today is the European Commissioner in charge of Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginijus Sinkevičius. He's held this job since 2019, and before that he was Minister of Economy and Innovation in the government of Lithuania and a member of the Lithuanian Parliament. Commissioner, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the contamination of Europe's seas. The European Environment Agency keeps highlighting this as a persistent problem, and actually if we look at the latest map, it's particularly red around the North Sea, but the Baltic doesn't look very good, bits of the Black Sea don't look very good. Why do you think this has been such a persistent problem?
Well, you know, all the pollution that is in our seas in different ways and different forms, it all comes from the shore. And that's different activities. Industrial, that's untreated urban wastewater, not treated properly. That's also, of course, partly agricultural too. Most importantly, that all that pollution gets exacerbated by additional pressures, such a climate change. We see the temperature rise. If you look at the Baltic, for example, you have many dead zones, but even more you have places where actually it's blooming so much that the rest of the possible inhabitants of that sea is dead or have zero chances of surviving.
So you have to address the chemical pollution and the waste that is coming from the shore. And what's being done on both of those fronts right now? So
zero pollution is one of our key policies in the Green Deal. It may be not the obvious one when we talk about the pollution from the chemicals. Fertilizer pollution, we have taken a concrete steps under our strategy farm to fork. Secondly, of course, what's extremely important is to ensure that we deal with our waste. Waste not only as, for example, packaging plastic, the one that we visit a lot, not so much on our beaches, but islands in the middle of the ocean, but also waste coming from our water, which is being used and then not properly treated. And therefore, we are now in the final stages of a directive on urban wastewater.
You mentioned plastics, and there is a new EU regulation since October. You've said that recycling is not enough. So you mean including recycling plastics, that's not going to solve this problem of all this stuff ending up in the seas?
In the seas, in our oceans, and in our bodies. So, you know, member states, business, they did a significant effort to increase the recycling capacities. And, you know, I absolutely praise that effort. However, we cannot be naive that we can recycle our way out of the plastic crisis that we are facing, because the plastic pollution, especially which comes from the packaging, is significantly increasing. So you had an increase of recycling, but then the increase of plastic pollution was even more significant, and you basically have this growing gap, which both goes kind of up, but the gap is also growing.
Have you seen a lot of pushback and lobbying from the industries that are behind single-use packaging?
Yes, not only, but single use. So single use was one of the steps. So one of those still possible steps besides recycling, and recycling will still have plenty of opportunities in the future. We really don't want to hinder the recycling. On contrary, we want to innovate and advance with it, but we need to look at other possibilities too. So single use, the ban on single use is one of the options. But then, of course, we had sometimes, I think, absurd discussions, and I think civil society was very active on that, you know, when you have a certain coating of a plastic forks or spoons, and saying that, you know, this coating does not make it a single use or so on. But I'm happy that we have advanced, and we have now 10 products that are under the single-use plastic directive is actually banned. But we want to go further. We want to get rid of unnecessary packaging. So when you stay in the hotel, I still find it absolutely unnecessary to have, you know, those small bottles packed, you know, for shampoo and shower gel, which can be done in refillable.
But even the small the paper cups, sorry, Freudian slip, yeah. The paper cups that we see everywhere, people just throw them away. This goes back to what you said about we can't just recycle our way out of this problem, because it's a question of changing people's habits. They think, I'll throw this away, everything's going to be fine because it's going to be recycled later. But the reality is there is some plastic in a lot of those paper cups. Exactly.
So plasticized paper as one is also addressed in our new directive, and it's very much within the HoReCa business, so housing and restaurants, where we do want to see change for a more reusable. We do, of course, have exemptions. We do understand that, you know, different cafes, they operate differently, but still, where there are opportunities, we would like to see much more reuse, and we have completed our impact assessment, which shows that it significantly can actually cut on CO2 emissions too.
I want to ask you about the global picture on biodiversity in seas and oceans, because that's also part of your remit. It's ocean governance, and I'm wondering, what is the EU doing in terms of instruments at a global level? I assume it's working with the UN, with the COP parties.
So, you know, in COP28 we have had a Oceans Day. It shows that, you know, it's also at the core of climate talks, because I think, you know, stakeholders, they do realize that despite that we cut emissions to zero, if our oceans are not able to absorb CO2, if they're not able to mitigate and regulate temperature, we're still busted. So, of course, we need a healthy oceans. It's been a significant year because we've managed, after 20 years of negotiations, finalize the agreement on the High Seas Treaty, so-called the BBNJ agreement. Now we are advancing and pushing hard for 60 countries to ratify, so that the agreement goes into place. And that gives us a real tool to actually have a rules-based system on the oceans beyond the national jurisdictions, or beyond the EEZ, those economic zones where
exclusion zones.
Exactly, where everyone sort of cares, where everyone does a good care of those, but then what's going on beyond, nobody cared much, and that's the vast majority of the ocean, and that's the vast majority of the ecosystem.
I'd like to bring things back to Europe for a moment, because one big issue here, especially for those of us who live in cities, is air pollution, and there's an estimate now that 97% of all of us live in cities are breathing in things that we shouldn't be breathing. We're above the level of what the World Health Organization recommends. What can the EU do on this?
So we are, you know, we're going to have our final, hopefully trilogue. It's between the Council, Member States, Parliament and Commission on the Air Quality Directive, where we actually trying to bring the air quality standards closer to WHO recommendation. And we find it as absolutely viable and possible to achieve for our major cities, where the problems are the biggest, and for the member states. Yes, you have couple areas in EU where, due to geographical conditions, the pollution will stays there, and for them to reach it would be difficult. But that doesn't mean that we shall stop ourselves from the progress, especially when we lose 200,000 EU citizens due to premature death due to diseases that actually are caused by the poor air quality. So the biggest issue is still the particulate matter, which is, of course,
the fine particles. Sorry, yes.
Absolutely, yes. So which is the issue that we face mainly in the larger cities, and that's of course a cause of the cause of it is a transport. We still have quite high industrial pollution of air, so those industrial areas, and of course coal regions, they are facing such issues because of their poor energy mix, and those citizens are under the biggest pressures.
Are you disappointed, though, that some EU capitals say that there should be simply a perspective for alignment with the WHO targets? That's a kind of not as ambitious, I guess, as what you would have wanted.
I mean, I honestly don't believe in voluntary targets. I don't believe that they can be reached. And if we would be negotiating something that is less of a value, maybe I could have accepted these arguments. But when we are basically negotiating about the health of our citizens, about the number of Europeans that we lose every year, it's a big loss for our economy because of the days that they cannot work. So it puts enormous pressure on our healthcare budget. It puts enormous pressure on our social budgets, and all those issues, they cannot be ignored. And I truly hope that member states will be able to establish these links, because the changes that we offer, that the member states need to introduce, they are much cheaper. They will make citizens feel better than inaction.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for being my guest. That was Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevičius, who is in charge of the environment, fisheries and oceans here at the European Commission. Thank you for following us, and do stay with us here on France 24.